Assalamu alaikum, my friends. Welcome to another session where we discuss and reflect on the verses of that amazing book, the Holy Qur'an, that is, if you give it a chance, will show you, will illustrate to you when you read it, that it is a timeless and divine text. Now, there's one aspect of the Holy Qur'an that I haven't really touched on, and I think, and that is the aspect of the fate of corrupted nations and corrupted generations. If you have read the Quran, or if you've spent a bit of time, just reading maybe a few chapters of the Quran, what you will soon discover is that there is this aspect of corrupted nations meeting a terrible fate. And that is a constant theme. I'd like to show you just one or two verses so that we know what we are referring to. Now, there's this verse here, 19, Surah 19, verse 59. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فخلف من بعدهن خلف أضاعوا الصلاة واتبعوا الشهوات فسوف يلقون غيا. So then, after them came a generation who abandoned observance and instead followed their every desire. Such a generation will meet with ruin. That's just one example of let's just look for another one. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا من قبلهم من قرن مكناهم في الأرض ما لم نمكن لكم وأرسلنا السماء عليهم مدرارا وجعلنا الأنهار تجري من تحتهم فأهلكناهم بذنوبهم فأنشأنا من بعدهم قرنا آخرين. Do they not see how many a generation before yours we have devastated? Generations who were entrenched on earth even more than yours. We delivered them heaven filled with abundant rains, then formed flowing rivers beneath them. Then we devastated them on account of their offenses and gave rise to new generations after them. This is another example, and there are more, but I will look at those two. Those two are very sort of emblematic of these verses that predict or that warn of a devastation, of ruin, which follows a period of corruption and dismissing of the code of the pattern that God requires for humanity. So let's just quickly make sense of that. What it speaks about is, of course, people who abandon Salah. The one of the verses here spoke about the abandoning of Salah, and of course we know now that Salah, who abandoned observance, is really observance. It is observance. Salah in its broad sense, how we should understand Salah, not in the diminished sense, but Salah in its broad sense means observance. It means adherence. It means performing your duty, and that is the idea of Salah. It is be connected to God, be connected to His will, connected to His law. And that is when a generation is destroyed. So after them came who abandoned observance and instead followed their every desire. So that is really what it says, is once your duty towards God, once your observance of the divine code is abandoned as a generation, as a people, as a nation, as a civilization, then it sets the scene for a destructive event that is to follow. Often these events are natural phenomena. Often these events are, and in the Quran, mostly what I sense is that these events are natural phenomena. But they could also be other forms of ruin. The Quran doesn't say specifically what type of ruin. And so it doesn't take an extremely high IQ person to look at the prediction, to look at the conditions that will allow for this unfortunate reality to come to pass. It doesn't take an extremely high IQ person to realize, but wait a minute, we are in fact in a period where the observance of the divine will, the observance of the divine code has been abandoned. Right? It's been abandoned not only by those who are at the helm of society, Western society, or those elites who are in control of Western society and who also exercise some sort of hegemony over the rest of the world. That observance has not only been abandoned by them, but that observance to the divine code has in fact been abandoned by Muslims. And yes, you can run around all you like saying that Muslims are saved, but I've got bad news for you. Muslims, if you watch the videos on this channel, we have a lot of catching up to do. We have, unfortunately, abandoned the Quran. If you want to see the Quran, Al-Kitab, as it calls itself, which translates to a book, but it also translates to the word code. It also translates to the word law. So Muslims have abandoned the Quran. Yes, they have. They've adopted an alternative source of divine law. And that source is the mouths of their scholars, the mouths of their Maulanas, their Sheikhs, their Imams. They put greater value in the utterances of their scholars. And yes, they will rather phone a scholar than read the Quran. It's like, have you seen this program, what is it, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on BBC? Now imagine you had 3 lifelines, and it's like you had the Quran, you had your Molvi or your Mufti, and you are told, let's do an equivalence. You have a clever guy to phone, or you have Encyclopedia Britannica or the internet. And he tells you, look, you can use a lifeline, and you say, no, I'm going to ask the man. I'm going to ask my guy, let's say the clever guy next door. When the Quran is there, I'm just using an analogy. The Quran, coincidentally on this program, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, they call it 3 lifelines. I don't know if you've seen it. The Quran is our lifeline, my brothers. The Quran is our lifeline. Not the Mufti, not the Sheikh, not the Ayatollah, not the Hujjatul Islam. Please, there is your lifeline. And what this verse very, very clearly states is that when a generation reaches the point where they abandon that lifeline, where they abandon Salat, which is the connection to the lifeline of God, then comes the time of destruction and ruin. There's this other verse also that similarly speak about, it goes into somewhat more detail in that it actually sketches the conditions a bit in greater detail. Here in Quran 6 verse 6, it states that a generation before yours, you can observe, you can look around you, right? That is the first sentence in this verse. First, look around and see. There were others here before you. Generations who were entrenched on earth even more than yours. So you can look at the American Empire, or the British Empire, or maybe we should call it the Anglo-Saxon Empire, which has ruled for what, 150, 200 years. If you look at that empire that's currently ruling planet Earth, the mightiest empire, they call themselves the mightiest empire that has ever ruled. If you look at that Anglo-American empire that is currently at the helm of planet Earth, not only militarily, but also culturally, also socially, in every way you can imagine, dominating our lives. The verse speaks to them here. It says, do they not see how many a generation before yours, before this Anglo-Saxon empire, we have devastated? Generations who were more entrenched on earth, even more than yours. Now you see, I think people often fail to realize that there were in fact empires and rulers and dominating powers in history that were more firmly established than the present Anglo-Saxon empire. We delivered them heaven filled with abundant rain. So they experienced abundance. They experienced amazing surplus. Then from flowing rivers beneath them. And these are illustrations of the beauty, the magnificence of these previous empires. Then we devastated them on account of their offenses and gave rise to new generations, to new empires after them. So the image that comes to mind here is one of prosperity, lavishness, luxury, success, thriving, and then following this thriving, a period of abandoning the law, the wishes, the code that is divine. Then comes the period of following their whims and fancies, their emotions, their cravings, their lusts. And when the emphasis shifts towards those following of lusts, fads and fantasies, then the destruction follows. Now, yes, just on this point, I was going to say that you might feel that, who was ever more powerful than the present American power or the American empire. And let me hasten to remind you that Egypt, the mighty Egyptian ruled for 3,000 to 4,000 years. 29 dynasties, I believe. Go and double check that. Or 30 dynasties. The final dynasty was the Ptolemies, back in the time of Julius Caesar. 29 dynasties ruled Egypt for more than 2,000 years. Abundance as the world has never seen. Even today, the technology of Egypt is unexplainable. The power, the technology to construct those things is unexplainable. And so we cannot claim that the current Anglo-Saxon controlling power is more entrenched, like the verse says. Who are entrenched on earth even more than yours. We delivered them heaven filled with abundant rains, then from flowing rivers beneath them. Then we devastated them on account of their offenses and gave rise to new generations, to new empires, to new nations after them. So my friends, the point I want to make at the outset of this video is that the devastation will be coming. The upheaval is coming. You have to be warned. You see, the Qur'an has sent warners over the ages. And towards the end of an empire, there are an increase in those warners. towards an end of an empire, there is an increase in warners. And in fact, God actually makes sure that you are not left in the dark, that you are warned, and that people do come to you and tell you, listen, you've got to watch out, this is going to happen. Now, it doesn't come in the form of me speaking to you. I'm just one voice. I'm going to speak to maybe 1,000 people here in the short term. You need to pay attention to all those other voices that are speaking to you. Those people who are looking at the trends, because that is really where it is visible, in the trends. If you look at the American debt, 29, 30 trillion, I'm not sure the latest amount. If you look at trade, the growing trade in the East and the reducing portion of trade in the West, lifestyle indices, the social collapse, the mental illness, the collapse of society in terms of people's mental well-being, psychological well-being. And there are so many areas, the inequality, social inequality, social and economic inequality. These are all trends that you can look at. You can go and search the internet and you'll see that it's all going the wrong way. And what is coming is a final reckoning amongst mankind. But then there's also devastation of the environment. Right? It is pollution of the soil, pollution of the air, pollution of the electromagnetic spectrum. And those are all factors that are not going in the right direction. It's harming us. The amount of pollutants in our food, the pollutants in our air, the pollutants in our soil, the pollutants in our food, it's all driving up the disease burden on humanity. And that disease burden comes in the form of heightened rates of cancer, mental unwellness, and many, many other problems. So what we are seeing is indeed a coming meltdown, and also the threat of war. I haven't even raised that, the threat of nuclear war, the threat of a massive war breaking out between various nuclear powers. And there are many nuclear powers that are at war in all but a hot war. The two most powerful nuclear powers we know who they are involved in an indirect war right now. They just haven't pushed the trigger yet. It can happen. There's other nuclear powers that are also sparring, like Pakistan, India, and so on. So there's a real threat of all of these, and there's also the trends, and there's the graphs, and there's the Qur'an that is promising, that this is the end result of an iniquitous generation, a generation that has cut itself off from the guidance and from the code of God. And so we are here, I am here, joining many others like me to issue a word of caution, to issue a word of warning that this is coming. There is going to be some upheaval. It might not affect us who are that severely. It could. But there are young people today that will experience it, that will without any doubt experience that crash. And the crash will be severe. You see, every civilization had its crash, as the Quran states clearly. Any iniquitous people, any iniquitous civilization that has become fixated on its own lusts and immoral urges and emotional whims and fancies, they have met with a terrible fate, and that is what is coming. And we are not absolved, my friends, as people who claim to be Muslims. If you've abandoned the book, if you abandoned the advice of those who come with advice to you, then you've abandoned, then you are part of the problem. But this is not a negative video. This is not a negative video. This is a positive video. And I set the scene for you to make it very, to leave no doubt with you that there is a crisis, there is a crunch, there is an upheaval, a period of upheaval on its way, and it's going to come. It could hit in 2 weeks' time, in 2 years' time, or in 20 years' time. And we need to be ready for it. You see, no shift in global powers ever come without a massive period of upheaval. Let me give you one or two examples. What is the last massive shift in global power? The last massive shift in global power was around 1815. And it was about 30 years before that period. That was an extremely turbulent. Okay, that's not the last, but let me take that as an example. Between 1780 and 1815, those 25 years there. That is what is referred to often as the European Napoleonic era, the wars of Napoleonic wars. But they affected the entire world. They affected the entire world. For example, I live in a country 10,000 kilometers away from Europe, at the southern tip of Africa. But we suffered 2 invasions during that period. We suffered an invasion in 1895 by the British, 1802 by the British, or is it 1795, right, round about there. A massive invasion by the British, where the Dutch was evicted or dethroned in this part of the world, the Dutch colonizer. And where we suffered massive upheaval. And that led to massive migrations internally in the country, and it led to traumatic events in this part of the world. And that is during that period. But we also had more upheavals. And I mean, if you lived in Europe in around 1789, right until about 1815, you would experience that upheaval. Of course, what we found then, what happened in the world, was the transfer of power from the more easterly part of Europe, which was vested in several dynasties or massive houses of power there, the Habsburg dynasty, the Louis of France, the Holy Roman Empire, the Russian Empire. All these empires ceded power to the British, to the Anglo-Saxons. So you can almost say that power shifted from the more mainland Europe to the oceanic power of Britain. Power went offshore. European power went offshore in 1815, when the British finally defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. And so that, my friends, was the massive upheaval that the entire world, the reverberations went throughout the world. And that was a minor shift in power. That was a shift in power from the mainland Europe to offshore Europe, to the islands of Britain, to the United Kingdom. And so that reverberated throughout the world. But we've had more subsequently. We had a resurgent Germany early in the 1900s. In fact, the late 1800s, we had a resurgent Germany where there was an attempt, or there was a potential re-shifting of power back to mainland in the form of Germany. And that was curtailed or stopped by the English-speaking world. And so England wrested power back from Germany in the First Great War of the 20th century. And so the power shifted back to Britain by 1919, and Germany was, of course, subdued and subjected due to the Treaty of Versailles. But then Germany was still not, because the German nation itself was still strong and powerful, although the German economy was devastated after the First World War. The German nation rose again by 1939, and was again subdued. But this time they were subdued by two new powers, by the power in the east, Russia, and by the power in the far west, America, the USA. And so mainly the Russian Empire subdued Germany and re-established two empires that straddled, or that really dominated the world for another 50 years. The Russian Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc under the domination of the US then as a new empire. So the power shifted further, became more oceanic. And the landlocked empire Russia somehow, still exercised some power. But even that shift in power had major consequences for us as a world. And if you were a person living in the Eastern Bloc, if you were a person living in Hungary or Bulgaria or Albania or Czechoslovakia or in any one of these Eastern Bloc countries, and in Russia, in fact, you would have experienced the turmoil of the late 90s when that empire was crumbling and was ceding power to the West. And so that is how major transformations and major shifts in power affects the common person, by migration, by refugees, by being exiled, by becoming homeless, by going hungry, and I haven't mentioned the Great Depression in America, which preceded the transfer of power between English and America. So, because really that is the precursor to the shifting of power from the English to the US. But those are all minor shifts, you see. Those are all minor shifts because they're basically shifts in power within the European context. That is what we really see since the late 1700s. The only real power with some sort of influence was the Ottoman Empire, and they became pretty much another European power by 1915. So, this cataclysm that is coming is not a shift in power between Europe and Europe. It will be a shift in power from the oceanic continent, part of the continent, back to the continental part of the continent. And when we speak the continental part of our planet, we speak about the Asiatic, Afro-Asiatic, Eurasian, or the Eurasia-African continent, because we are actually one continent. If you think about it, Africa is separated by a very, very thin canal from Asia. So there is really the Africa-Eurasian continent. That is the one continent, that this planet, that I guess 80% of this planet occupies the population. 80% of this planet occupies the Africa-Eurasian landmass. We are all connected. I can drive people. I have a friend, I have a very close family member who's driven from this city all the way to Asia in an SUV, in a 4x4 Land Rover. They did it in a few months' time. So it's drivable. We can drive from Africa all the way to Asia. That is a factor of Africa. There's a small ferry, I think, that crosses the Suez Canal or something. So I'm telling you that the shift in power thus far that we've experienced in 200 years were minor compared to what is coming. Because all the indicators are that this next shift will be a shift not between European powers, but away from the European powers. And by European powers, I mean the Western European powers. And it doesn't exclude Europe. I'm not saying Europe will not be part of the new established power that will emerge. But that new power will be continental. It will be Afro-Eurasiatic, if I can make up that word, Eurasia and African. So the upheaval that is coming is going to be severe, my friends, and it's going to result in generations and people, societies being replaced by other societies. If you are currently regarding yourself as a citizen of the Oceanic Empire, of the Anglo-Saxon Empire. If you are located in New York, if you are located in Cape Town, if you are located in Australia, Sydney, if you are located in any country that has tied itself up, its own fortunes up with the US, with Britain, and with their vassal states, then you are the one that I'm talking to here. And that is why it's good that it's an English-speaking audience that is listening to this. You see, you are the one that I'm referring to here that will be affected most by the coming upheaval. That upheaval is going to take every conceivable form. Pollution, destruction of your environment. It is going to take the form of collapse of your economy, poverty, scarcity. It's going to take the form of political upheaval, in other words, war and social instability. And those are all the ways in which this upheaval is going to affect you. And that is what you need to prepare for. Now let's come to the positive side. I've made it abundantly clear, and I've given you a thorough background of why, how, and when it will happen. And that the Quran predicts this. So now the question is, what is the posture? What posture do we assume? What do we do? Because the message of the Quran, the message of the Anbiya, the message of those who want to emulate the Anbiya, it's not just one of doom and gloom, but it is to do the nadhr or the warning, but also the bashar is the mubashir part of the message. And I'm going to come to the bashar. You see, mubashirin. We are not just mundhirin, we are also mubashirin. So what is the glad or the positive side of this message? The positive side of this message is that you can in fact escape. You see, there is a way for you to escape. In fact, the Quran states it very, very clearly that the means of escaping such an upheaval. Take a look at this verse here and tell me what you think about this verse. Quran in chapter 4, verse 100. This is the translation of Yusuf Ali. I actually have that translation, so I will go to my translation also, because it's within the number of verses, the chapters that I've done myself. Right? So I've done up till, I think, chapter 7 and a bit of chapter 8. He who forsakes his home in the cause of Allah finds in the earth many a refuge, wide and spacious. So that is one of the clues here. He who forsakes his home in the cause of Allah finds in the earth many a refuge. Yajid fil ard muragaman kathiran wasa'atan. So the earth itself, the open tracts of land that are lying open, are really there as an escape. That is offered as one escape, as one option for you who want to prepare an escape avenue or a route to escaping the upheaval. There's another verse, but let me just quickly get to my verse that actually, the translation that I've done. Let me just quickly get to that. Okay, this is my translation. Same verse, but just a different translation. Chapter 4, verse 100. Those who go into exile for God's sake will find many places of safety as well as resources out in the land. So it's more or less the same. It comes down to pretty much the same meaning that I'm getting from this verse. So that is really the first escape that you and I can count on, is that we can lay out or go and seek an alternative, an escape. And really, if you look at the Great Depression of the 1930s in America, when they had their extreme economic meltdown, people in the cities really found refuge with family members in the countryside, because the countryside has still resources that are available, natural resources, just a simple thing like firewood, like, just wildlife that you could survive on, basically even just livestock that you could maintain. And my friends out there facing this calamity, this coming calamity, this is one avenue that the Qur'an is offering you. And so consider this, think about it. How do we allow for that posture? Now, let me just quickly bring in another point here. In fact, I'm going to just mention this for you. We in this country have started feeling the effects of this meltdown. Right? The effects of this huge meltdown is already starting. It's already encroaching on us. Like, for example, right now we have entered a stage of electricity shortage. Now, electricity has always been something that we've grown up with. It was there, it was abundant. If you plug something in at the wall, it works. Our lives you can't imagine yourself without electricity. And right now, this country, a satellite state of America, of the US, yes, South Africa is a BRICS nation, but it's a BRICS nation 10% and pro-America 90%. Let me just break that news to you. 10% BRICS, 90% West, pro-America, pro-West. So unfortunately, we are not really BRICS 90%. We are BRICS maybe in a form of a token form, or in a form of just public, making some sort of public overtures. This country, being an American satellite state, being a pro-Western state, is experiencing about a 50% reduction in its electricity supply. And it is worsening. We've started out 5 years ago with 2 hours a day without electricity. Right now we have 10 hours a day, no electricity. It is predicted that by the end of next month, this country will have 16 hours a day without electricity. So that is the trend, that is the pattern. And the point I'm trying to make is that the signs, the effects are already coming. They are already encroaching. And so what I'm saying is that the cities are going to become hellholes. That is what I'm saying. Because after the electricity goes away, the water will stop running, because the water systems require electricity. And then, we're looking at inflation, we're looking at scarcity of food, we're looking at lack of supply, the supply channels shutting down. And so the other point I just want to add to this is that there is, I don't know if you must have seen, I've mentioned Sheikh Imran Hussein, right? And his advice basically is, for the coming meltdown or for the coming upheaval, what you require is to set up a village that is rural, that is deep rural. In fact, in obeisance to this verse of the Qur'an, the verse of the Qur'an, it states that the country, the open land, the deep country is where your safety lies, right? Imran Hussein has, in fact, already a while back promoted the idea of the self-contained village, right? And so I just want to mention also, in this country, we have, in fact, a small private town, private city of a few hundred families called Orania. And whilst the electricity has gone off for the rest of South Africa, they've actually been able to keep the power going. And the way they've done it is through new renewable methods. They've pooled their resources, and instead of each house trying to fit solar panels, they've actually created one solar plant, and they've become electrified throughout, so they don't suffer shortage. And that is an example of out of a country, deep rural establishment, a village establishment. So let me just come to that. That is really, I think, the one avenue that we need to explore is to start the process of identifying deep rural settlements or deep rural points where we can acquire that land and make that the escape from the coming upheaval. And wherever you are, there's always rural areas open, no matter where you are. The real problem is going to affect the cities, and that is what the Qur'an says, in fact. The Qur'an, in fact, speaks about the destruction of the qarya. You see, the qarya, the city, the metropolis, is where the meltdown really happens. I was at the lecture last weekend by Sheikh that I respect, Aili Sheikh Muhammad Al-Asi. He was in town here by us for a few lectures. And he revealed this knowledge to me that I was never aware of, is that destruction visits the urban centers, the metropolises, the cities, and not the rural areas. The rural areas are hardly ever the victim of massive decay, destruction, collapse. And so that just adds, to this point. And then I recall reading the Quran is always referring to the qarya, the qura, the cities who are the sites of destruction and collapse. So that's the one point I want to make, my brothers. But there's another one that I want to leave with you, and that is, as a positive message to you, is, and I'm not saying to you, sell your house now and move to the. I'm saying get something in place. Like, for example, 5 years ago, I signed a lease agreement with a landowner in a rural area. He had a massive piece of land, and he had 80 hectares of land. It's not that big, but it's quite big. And I signed a lease for 1 hectare with this gentleman. I made the agreement with him that I agreed to a piece of that land for about 1 hectare, and I made I signed that lease agreement. I have it with me, and I thought, look, there's my patch of land. I don't have to buy the land. I have a lease. I have a lease holding to 1 hectare of that land, and there it is. What paid cash, and I don't have a monthly payment for it, and he needed the money, and I paid him the money, and I have that piece of land sitting there. And so I have other family members who have some land off, out of the city, and we can have conversations about family that have land already, because the one thing that the folks during the Great Depression spoke about was that when you own land, you always have the need for hands. You always have the need for hard-working hands, hard-working people. I can't tell you how much work is. There is no such a thing as unemployment, my friends, when it comes to rural farming. To maintain a piece of land has work for innumerable people, let alone the family of the owner of that land or the leaseholder of that land. And so there's always place for more hands on a farm, whether it is clearing the soil, whether it's mending the fences, whether it is seeing after the livestock, whether it is securing your own shelter, homes, whether it is just generally food production for your animals, for yourself, etc. So processing of food, because when you've produced a number of produce, let's say whatever you're producing, grapes, fruit, there's also the work of processing that food. So a farm, the land provides innumerable opportunities for any number of people, and that is really a fact that I can tell you today. So that is the one avenue, and that is what Imran Hussein is saying. That is what Sheikh Al-Asi mentioned to me, that the cities, in that speech, will be the sites of meltdown and collapse and decay, and that is really where you need to get away from, or at least have an escape route from. The other point that I want to make here now is, besides having access to open space, to the land out there, is to have a social support circle. And that is also a core essential way in which you will escape the collapse, the meltdown. You see, the prophets came to warn people, and they offered them two avenues. Number one is escape physically, to relocate themselves physically. That is what Noah said. You know, what else did Noah? The story of Noah, the classic story of get on the ark and escape the upheaval. The ark represents the escape, right? It is a physical relocation onto the ark. And on the ark there was escape from that turmoil, and from the turmoil of the flood and so on. What we're saying is that, in other occasions, on other occasions, in other situations, the escape was just a relocation, was exile. As the verse states here, the verse that I've just showed you, is that exile or relocation, hijrah. Hijrah means to migrate. That is really the avenue, hijrah, right? وَمَا يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَمَا يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. It is the what we call the hijrah. It is a physical relocation from the urban, from the metropolises to the open land. But now the second point I want to raise with you is, and I'll repeat again, I'm not saying go and move your home now. I'm just saying be prepared. Be prepared. Right? Take a step. Take a few steps that will ensure that you have that avenue. And the beautiful house that you have now, the apartment that you have now, the security that you have now, you must remember that property will be affected by, electricity shortage, then by water shortage, and then by problems with accessing food very soon, and then finally social collapse. And that is not, I'm not saying that. That I've given you the Qur'an as a basis to that. When a society becomes drowning in iniquity, in corruption, in evil, it's going to happen. And if you don't want to believe the Qur'an and me, fine. Go and live and enjoy yourself. Go on with what you have now and play and be merry, and go and do all your fun things every day and forget about what I've said to you. I've said it to you because it's a repeated occurrence in history, and the conditions are there now to be able to predict the same type of occurrence. The second escape avenue that I want to mention in this video is the idea of acquiring a social support structure. You cannot survive the upheaval alone, my friends. There is no way. There is no way that you can survive it on your own. You need your extended family. You need to reconnect with people who are relatives, who are related to you by blood, because there's a natural affinity between you and your children, you and your parents, you and your sisters and brothers, you and your cousins in some societies. You need to reconnect with these people. You need to mend any issues you have with them, because they are going to need you and you are going to need them. And you need to teach your children also to retain those relationships, those connections with their own blood relatives. But it's not confined to blood relatives. It could be people who are ideologically, who are spiritually connected to you also. So if you are, let's say, on this channel, and you have people that you've connected with on this channel, they would also qualify as people that you should reach out to. And we should be there for each other, whether it is in terms of advice, whether it is in terms of physical support, financial support, material support, in whatever form. We should provide that. And I bring you back to the idea of what Imran Hussein says, to establish these villages, these off-grid villages, where you create your own means of survival. But of course, you cannot go into these villages and be one family or be 5 people, you need at least to be 10 to 15 households that could support each other mutually. All right? So the second advice that I'm leaving with you, and that is also from the Quran. Let me show you what verse that comes from. Let me just quickly show you this verse here first. Maybe we'll look at another few. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. They ask you whom they should support financially. In other words, who they should aid, who they should be investing in or supporting. Reply, should you spend out of generosity, then let it be for parents and close family members, and orphans and the needy and the homeless. Whatever good you do, God is fully aware of it. So in other words, what this verse is speaking about is that charitable sense of charity must be as part of those who are close relatives. Let's quickly see if I can find another. I think this is a very, very eloquent, beautiful one. Yeah, look at this one that speaks about a social support structure. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu isbiru wasabiru warabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. Heed this, you who embrace the scripture. Persevere, endure collectively, stick together, and revere God, and you will achieve success. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Now this is for me such an eloquent one here, because it really clearly spells out that salvation lies in sticking together with a support, with a social group that will have your back and whose back you will have. And so that is the second thing that the Quran speaks about, is besides telling you that the countryside is your escape, it tells you that social compact, that social support circle, family, friends, devoted co-devotees to the Holy Code, the Holy Quran, these people, or to anything that is sacred, these people will become your support, and you together will weather, will survive, will flourish amidst this meltdown. And then, of course, the third point that I want to leave with you, the first one being is creating an opportunity for you to go and relocate away from the meltdown of the cities. And the second one being maintaining a healthy support circle of about 30 or 40 people. Well, we can't be close friends with 40 people, but you have 1 or 2 good friends, and then you have another 20, 30 that are extended, by extension, also connected to you. Right? And that is what we're talking about. And more, if possible. But then the third one is the endurance, the sabr aspect. Because this verse also, and so many other places, it speaks about wasbiru, persevere, endure, which means a sense of not losing your direction, not losing your dedication, not losing your focus. You maintain your focus, you maintain your effort, you maintain your direction, you maintain your dedication to the code with that group, and you will flourish. Your children will flourish, and you will inherit what is left of the earth eventually. And my friends, that is really what we are talking about. But now, if you are going to ignore this, what I've told you now, if you feel that this is crazy talk of a man on YouTube, if you're going to take that position, which unfortunately 90% of you will not feel the need to make any moves or to do anything, you will leave it for a day when you will not be able to make any moves. You will leave it for a day when you will go down with the rest, unfortunately. And you would not have heeded the advice, the warning that comes from the Qur'an and from those who are in the know, who know, who can see, who have read the graphs, the trends. My friends, there's not going to be a sudden stop in inflation. There's not going to be a sudden stop in nuclear confrontation. There's not going to be a sudden stop in the supply of water, electricity. There's not going to be a sudden stopping of those crises, the shortage of natural. It's not going to stop suddenly. It's only going to go worse. And this is not a negative video. Remember, this is not a video where you are forewarned. It's not a negative video. It is a good message for you. It's a message that helps you. If I tell you now that there is a disease that will afflict you, and to not get that disease, you need to drink this and that and whatever, make yourself a cup of honey with tea and you will not get the disease. I'm not giving you bad news, I'm giving you good news. I'm giving you the solution, my friends. And so I hope you will heed. And if you don't heed, it's also fine. We are all free people. We will do what we need to do. But I think it is important that if we want to, for our children's sake, that we maintain, that we stand for the code, we stand for what is righteous, and we do not throw ourselves in with a lot of those who have undermined the divine will, the divine nature of things. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Have a good day further on, my friend, and may Allah protect you and guide you wherever you are. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.